What's going on, team? It's Caddy with Money Vesting. I hope that you all are having an amazing day. So in this video, I will give you guys an update on Boeing stock. We'll go over their financial summary going back as far as 2016. We'll look at their revenues, their operating and gross margins, the net income, and then we'll dive into their second quarter 2020 earnings, which they reported this week. And I'll also go over the first 6 months of 2020 and how well the company is doing and what to expect moving forward and what the future guidance looks like for Boeing company. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, please make sure to drop a like. It really helps out with the channel. If you're new, make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future market updates and videos related to these stocks, investing, and technical breakdowns. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Boeing's financial summary, which is what this chart right here essentially represents. And looking at the top line revenues, they've been kind of up and down, with 2016 revenues sitting at $94 billion compared to 2017 when they dropped down to $93 billion. And in 2018, revenues stood at well over $100 billion and then dropped down to $76 billion as of last year in 2019. And that's also because of the 737 MAX crisis, which resulted in a decline in revenue and deliveries. Now, that being said, talking about the gross margins, the company had decent, sizable gross profit margins up until 2019, but now the gross margins have dropped down well below 10%. Prior to that, they were at somewhere between 14 and 19%, while averaging around 14.59%. Net income has also taken a hit as a result, and the company has been reporting net income since 1997. So now for well over 20 years, the company was reporting an annual net income up until last year when Boeing reported an annual net loss in 2019 of close to $636 million. And that is most certainly a cause for concern because that was primarily driven by their issues related to the 737 MAX, and now to add further to the pain, we also have the global pandemic. So this right here is going to be Boeing's performance for the first full 6 months of 2020, so the first half of 2020, and quite honestly, it's not the best financial picture to look at. For one, the revenues have seen a significant decline of 26% year over year, from $35.6 billion in the first half of 2019 to now just over $28.7 billion in the first 6 months of 2020. And we will break down the revenue and the business segments later in this video, but talking about profitability, Boeing is unfortunately severely hurting right now, with a net loss in the first 6 months alone at over $3 billion compared to just $793 million same time last year. And last year in 2019 alone, the entire year, the annual net loss, as I've already mentioned, was close to $636 million, compared to the first 6 months of 2020 where Boeing reported a net loss of over $3 billion. So it'll be a really challenging time for the company moving forward and to turn things around, and for the second half of 2020 if they're able to do that. In my opinion, it's going to be another annual net loss year for Boeing, which is again very unfortunate for the company. So looking at the company's cash flows, their operating and free cash flows went negative in the first half of 2020 as well, as they deal with these challenges related to the 737 MAX and the pandemic. The free cash flows were negative at $10.3 billion, down heavily from a positive free cash flows of close to $1.2 billion same time last year in 2019. Talking about their cash versus debt, so Boeing's total cash and marketable securities sit at just over $32.4 billion as of the first 6 months of 2020, with a total consolidated debt at close to $61.4 billion. So which is not the worst thing in the world. Yes, we do like to see a cash to debt ratio of over 1, meaning that the company has just as much in cash as it has in long-term debt. But it also depends largely on the industry and the size of the company. So in my opinion, for Boeing, which is at 0.5, the cash to debt ratio, that's okay. It's not ideal, but it's also not terrible either. So now breaking down their revenue segments, there's primarily 3 ways Boeing actually makes money, and that's through their commercial business, through their defense, security, and government business, and then finally through their global services. So I've done a separate analysis on Boeing versus Airbus that you're more than welcome to watch, and I essentially went over the fact that Boeing is also a government contractor, and a lot of the defense budget is spent on Boeing because the US military and defense needs Boeing to produce these jets, these parts, and these aircrafts, which they can use as well. So this right here shows us the commercial airplanes delivery, which for the first half of 2020 have seen a decline of 71%. So they delivered close to 239 commercial airplanes in the first 6 months of 2019 compared to just over 70 in the first 6 months of 2020. And as a result, you can see their revenues were hurt by more than 53% year over year. And in the notes, you can see exactly why that happened. They essentially mentioned that's because of their low volume deliveries for the 737 MAX, and of course that has been grounded for the better half of the last 13 to 14 months. Now, talking about their defense, space, and security business, which they cater to the US government, that was actually not affected as much as the commercial business and only saw a decline of 4% year over year, and the revenues were close to being flat at over $12 billion in the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the $13.1 billion same time last year. The one thing I will point out though is their operating margins. They actually dropped from close to 14% to now just under 4%, which is also what we saw in the financial summary. So definitely something to consider. But now looking at their global services, you'll notice a very similar pattern as to the defense and security business, how the revenues are not affected as much as their commercial business, and how the revenues were close to over $8 billion in the first half of 2020, down just about 11% from a year ago. But their operating margins, again, taking a huge dive from over 14% in 2019 to now just under 1% for that business segment. Now, there's a few more slides that I want to share with you guys that are from their second quarter earnings of 2020 to get a better understanding of their future guidance. So this slide right here for business environment, essentially you'll notice how the daily operations saw a sudden drop in March going into May, and now they're starting to pick back up. Similarly, the active fleet chart, which is really cool, it tells you how many planes are actually in service versus parked. And you'll notice a very similar pattern where a lot of planes were in the parked territory as soon as the pandemic hit, and we're now seeing a shift more towards the in-service segment, which is good for the company because they want their planes more to be active and in service than just be parked because of the holding costs that Boeing incurs when these planes are not in service. At the bottom, you'll see a world map, and it breaks down regions by flight departures, and more than 80% departures are in yellow, less than 20% departures are in red, and around the 50% level are going to be orange/yellowish. And you'll notice that Russia and China are the two with the most flight departures, and countries like the US, India, pretty much all of Africa and South America doesn't have any inbound or outbound flights right now. So looking at all of this information, I kind of sympathize with the company too, because this completely blindsided them and they were already dealing with their 737 issues. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Will Boeing recover from this, or will they just shrink because of less travel demand? Because I think we really need to categorize travel in general. And the biggest one was probably business. The second one I would say was essential, which is people traveling around the holidays to go see their families and friends. And the third one was tourism. Now, out of the three, the biggest one, which is business travel, can now be done remotely through video conferencing to some extent. So I'm not quite sure what the recovery is going to look like for Boeing. But again, let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Is Boeing going to go back to the same level as it was once their 737 MAX issues are resolved and once we are past the pandemic? Let me know in the comment section down below. But now we're going to jump over to my TradingView platform to look at the stock price, look at the performance, map out some key support and resistance levels and what levels we need to watch moving forward. Alright guys, so here we are inside my TradingView platform, and I often get questions about what platform I'm using to look at all my charts and patterns and create different watch lists. So this is the TradingView platform. If you want to get started, the link is going to be down in the description below. So right now we're looking at Boeing Corporation, ticker symbol BA. So you can see as of the most recent close and as of the time of this video, Boeing closed at $158 right on the dot, and it was down close to about 2.5% on Friday, which was July 31st. So going over the weekly charts, right now we're looking at weekly candles. So every single candle represents 1 week worth of trading. So you can go back as far as 2016 when Boeing stock was essentially trading as low as $111, right around that level. And since then, it did an incredible job pushing up 310%, going all the way as high as $444. in February of 2019. It was on an ascending pattern, so it was growing, it was increasing in price, but then moving forward, you'll kind of notice that there was a decline started to happen. So you'll notice how Boeing stock was essentially making these lower highs and lower lows, so it wasn't going as high as it did the previous time, and at the same time, it was making lower lows, so it was going lower than it did the previous time. And this is primarily due to the 737 MAX and the production issues around that aircraft and that plane, and also the lower delivery volumes and the demand for that airplane in general, and how it was grounded for so long by the FAA. That being said, this was also an issue that Boeing could have dealt with and resolved moving forward, but this right here is a much severe drop in Boeing stock, when back in February of 2020 it was trading at close to $342 per share, and then it dropped close to over 73 to 74%, all the way as low as $89 to $90. So that is quite a significant hit in the company's market cap. Right now it's sitting at just about $89 billion. So definitely something to consider and make sure that we are aware of. The volume on a regular 10-day average period is close to about 32 million shares that are being traded. And again, if you were to kind of scroll down, this right here is going to be the quick financial summary in terms of the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow for the company on both the annual and quarterly basis, which we have already gone over. So this right here is going to be the 2019 loss that I mentioned of close to 636 million. And if you were to go over to the balance sheet, this right here is going to be the total assets versus total liabilities. And you can see that total assets are just a little bit less than total liabilities. Again, not something that we need to be concerned about for Boeing, similar to the cash versus debt ratio, but something to consider moving forward. And if that total liabilities number consistently is going up and the long-term debt is also going up for the company, and the cash value and the total assets are decreasing, then it becomes more of a problem. But right now I think it's decent, it's okay, it's not ideal, but it's still manageable. But that being said, now we're going to jump over to the 4-hour chart to kind of understand the price action and how the pattern has been performing after the crash. So this right here is kind of like the horizontal support that Boeing was essentially following along with. So $117 to $118 level. That level has been validated multiple times. So going back as far as April 2020, so that's where the stock essentially pulled back all the way down to and then pushed up, found support. It made its way back down to that level in May of 2020, found support at that level once again, and then pushed up. And this right here was also kind of like a descending triangle that Boeing stock was making. So it was making lower highs. So it wasn't going as high as it did the previous time, but it was also making these horizontal support until finally breaking out of this level and running up close to, I think, 100 or 200% from May 2020. So I think this jump right here was close to about 102% when it was trading all the way as high as $237. Over the course of the next few months, you can see that it started making a very similar pattern with a new support at around $177. And the reason is very simple, because this was previously acting as some type of resistance right here. So this old resistance at 177 started acting as new support for Boeing stock moving forward, and it was making these lower highs once again, very similar to what we have seen in the past. So a descending triangle with the pattern not going as high as it did the previous time, with a very similar horizontal support. So the expectation would be, if patterns tend to repeat themselves and based on historical patterns, it did break out of this level with heavy volume. So if I were to bring out the volume tab, you'll see how the volume essentially spiked right around that level when we saw this huge breakout. That being said, this is now being seen as a breakdown, and that's also because of the earnings call, which we went over, the second quarter earnings for Boeing. And you'll notice that they missed their EPS and their revenue estimates, along with providing us with a weak future guidance, and the fact that they are already at a net loss in the first 6 months of close to $3 billion. And we also looked at the recovery, and it largely depends on how quickly this pandemic is over and the travel demand returns to levels what we have seen. The CEO has mentioned it multiple times that it's going to take at least 2 to 3 years for us to recover fully from this pandemic, and to add further to the pain, we just need to wait and see whether their 737 MAX goes back into the market and there's significant demand for that aircraft or not. But moving forward, there are going to be some key support levels that I want you guys to watch. The first one is literally exactly where the stock is trading right now, which is going to be at around $156 to $157 level. And the reason I mention that is because that is previously acted as some type of resistance going back as far as April of 2020. So you can see the stock essentially pushed up all the way to that level and then pulled back. Moving forward, if we were to break below this level, then all of these previous resistances, in my opinion, one of them should hold as a really strong support. Again, it's really difficult and challenging for us to kind of understand where Boeing stock is headed because it's been very volatile. So you know, the whole idea is, if you are trading this stock, to manage your risk appropriately and make sure that if you are setting up a trade, that your risk reward trade-off is something that makes sense for you, and the reward essentially outperforms the risk that you are taking for that trade. In terms of investing in Boeing stock long term, it's a very uncertain time, so I personally would stay away from it in the long term, but still doesn't hurt for us to look into this and, you know, take a quick swing trade if the opportunity presents itself. So 157, 158 is going to be the next support. If it were to break below that level, then the next support I'm going to be watching is close to 144 to 145, where the stock has essentially found previous resistance, and then right below that we're going to be watching close to about this level, which is going to be 135. So that's kind of like the game plan and the next key support levels that I want you guys to watch from a technical standpoint. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and my quick technical breakdown of Boeing stock. We also went over all the fundamentals and the financials for the company. As always, if you did, please make sure to drop a like. It really helps out with the channel. Also subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future market updates and videos related to investing and technical breakdowns. As always, happy investing, and I will see you guys in the next video.